And so they can't get his PowerPoint to work. And so it's dark. There's Stuart at the front. He looks like he's this big, talking in the dark. It took them halfway through.
Uh-huh.
Halfway through, and you feel your heart, like it's Self-Reg, right? Self-Reg
Yeah.
explains it. You feel
Yeah.
you feel, it's not just that you can't get it going. You feel guilty and worried, and trying not to waste people's time, and it kind of really throw you off. So
Yeah.
that was the most fun that I've done in
Yeah.
this role. Yeah,
Yeah.
working. People,
Yeah.
working,
Yeah, we
share
are
and talk, and
already online also on Facebook. So hello everyone once again. I have Susan Hopkins with me here today. She's the first person that actually I contacted when I started my Self-Reg adventure. Hi, Susan.
hi. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really thrilled to be with you.
Yeah, I've got a long list of questions, but I think we're also open to the questions from the viewers. I
Yes.
think it's I think it's quite a big event because actually I advertised it yesterday, and we've already have over 100 people registered. So. Yeah, I think people are looking forward to hearing about Canadian experiences in
Well,
Self-Reg.
that's wonderful. And the online, with everything going on in the world right now, this is happening more and more. But it's
Yeah,
also a nice opportunity. Canada's a long way from Poland, right? And we have a lot of amazing people here that are interested in the work that you all are doing and bringing to life in Poland. So this is a nice opportunity. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it. And thank
yeah.
you, everyone, for making time in your day to come hear our conversation.
Thanks for agreeing. I know that you've got a pretty busy schedule, so that's really a great thing that you agreed to come and talk. So can we actually start from saying a few words about Self-Reg? What it is. I know that most people who are present know something about Self-Reg. They've read the book, but let's try to make it short. But so, what is Self-Reg for you?
You may have to cut me off, and I'm not good at being short. So if you
Oh,
need to cut
right.
me off,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
no, I'm
Okay.
just joking. So it's a hard question to answer. What is self-reg in just 2 seconds? And I will give you a definition,
Mm.
everyone. The important thing I think to realize is that there are many different definitions of self-regulation. Okay, so self-reg is actually a framework and a method. It's a process for
Yeah.
supporting the development of self-regulation, not just in children, across the lifespan, and you and I as well. But one of the problems that happen is most people, I get reached out to all the time, or I'll go into presentations. I'll work with school boards or families or communities or whatever, and most people think they have a working definition in their heads of self-regulation. I don't know if your experience in Poland is different, but here most people who think they're talking about something different. So they usually mean it's some version of self-control, or it's managing behavior, or it's social emotional learning, or it's self-regulated learning, which is managing yourself to get your work done. It's very much in this sort of self-control in the individual, make good choices kind of mindset. And that's related. It's not that that's not related. So before anybody who signed up comes today says, that's why I came here. It is
Mm-hmm.
related, and it doesn't mean your definitions are wrong. If you're working with one of those definitions, you're not wrong. Stuart did research, it's in Child Development 2015, I think, on the different definitions of self-regulation, and there's over 400, right? And there was actually a second study coming out that's saying that it's even more self-efficacy, all these things that are sort of related, and we use the language of self-regulation, and yet we're working with a different definition. And so I think that's really important clarification, because the people that are trying to get their kids to, clean up, or they're worried about the meltdowns or the the inward turning behaviors, all of these sorts of things. They're trying to figure out, how to get kids to do that. And the self-control approaches just don't work that well. Or, don't get me wrong, sometimes they do. And if they do, terrific, right? Then you're on the right track. What do you do when they don't? So self-regulation, we use the psychophysiological understanding of it. And that's the original. If you went back to the first definition of self-regulation in history, it's the psychophysiological understanding. So it's brain-body. The brain and the body is connected, and it's about it is about all of these systems. There's hundreds of systems that are always trying to maintain this sort of balance, this homeostasis, this balance, and it's part of being human. But it's not just within individuals; it's within groups. So self-reg for us is about managing stress, and it's about understanding energy and tension. And so we look across 5 domains, but that's what it's about. It's about managing stress, the good, the bad, and managing energy and tension, so that then we can do all those things we want to do, the self-control things that we want to do and need to do in our lives.
Yeah, for me, what's important is that you can actually see it on various levels. Both on individual and group level, right? Individual, then the relation, for example, mother and child, but also classroom, but also the whole school, and as well as the whole political system can be also seen through the self-reg lens. So when I started, it was like, yes, self-reg is this parenting method. That's the small understanding. When I joined foundations, I suddenly realized that it's so much more to be seen. And now when I'm reading this book, it's actually, it came at a very good moment for me. Because what's happening in Poland is, lots of political turmoil, and I'm trying to understand, and I'm trying to talk, for example, to my mom about it. She's very angry about some things, and when you see it through self-reg lens, then you start understanding that it's kind of not only about mother and child relationship or a school, but the whole society. So that's self-reg.
It is. The book that you're holding is Stuart's newest book. We have 2. We have another one, which
I've got both of them.
Which is schools. The subtitle of Reframed is Self-Reg for a Just Society. So even though I just talked about we're really trying to understand behavior in all its many forms, right? And it's about so much more. And people that start learning self-reg, they get it's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so you begin seeing it absolutely everywhere. If you follow any political system, so let's not look at yours. I know a little bit about some of the things in Poland, but let's look at my southern neighbors here in the US. And how do these groups of people that maybe are suddenly so irrational, right? Or some of them may be rational, others it seems so irrational and we can't explain it through logic. Well, when you understand that there is this brain body connected, right? And that we are, that is like a platform for everything that happens. And it's not just about brain states and fight or flight, this sort of thing. There's a whole lot more. There's also the underlying energy and tension of our whole body. Like any of us that have ever walked into think about a birthday party, and it seems great. And then all of a sudden one child, I watched a fist fight break out at a birthday party, and the parents are mortified because they're like, what kind of, citizen or character am I raising? It's not that, this was a 2.5-year-old that got overwhelmed, overexcited from everything. And it comes out in these behaviors, and so as parents, it can be really, self-reg to me is full of hope, because when we were trying all our strategies to manage behavior, your timeouts, your time in the corner, the stool, your carrot and your stick stuff, all of this sort of things to get the good behaviors. And they don't really work. And we begin to think, oh, what does this mean about my child? What does it say about me? Or we as parents find ourselves, losing our cool. We're yelling at our child. We don't believe in that, but we do. Where does that come from? Well, if you start to look at the times that happens, I bet you, you can see it's like a volcano, right? And we're human.
Yeah.
We're human, and recognizing that for what it is. So it is societal. It is contagious, right? That's limbic contagion. There's science behind it. But and it's not just the negative stuff that's contagious. The positive stuff, we need more of the positive stuff is contagious too, right? So
Yeah.
I'm probably already off track on your questions, am I?
Yeah, but we don't have to follow them exactly in the order I thought about them, because I know it always flows.
Yeah.
So, well, tell us something about the Mehrit Centre. How did it come about? Because I know the very small history of Self-Reg from about 4 years now.
Yeah.
What happened earlier? And I'd like to know more about the Canadian experience in promoting Self-Reg, because I know that it grew. It grew immensely, and right now you've got lots of people around the world. So, how did it happen?
Well, when I'll go back to when I met Stuart, because it's part of how sort of the Mehrit Centre started, because I was connected with Stuart in the Mehrit Centre before I ever worked here. I was I had 20 years in education, and I did a whole bunch of different roles in education, from being a teacher to, administrator, to working at ministry levels, so the government levels, curriculum writer, this sort of thing. And I was in 2011, so this is the year before. Mehrit Centre started in 2012. I was researching a kindergarten curriculum, so a play-based, culturally grounded, so it was actually culture-based in a northern part here of Canada, a new curriculum for children that were 4 and 5 years old. And I kept coming across his name, this Stuart Shanker guy, right? So that was really influencing where I live now, here, Ontario. But he's worked internationally for decades, right? So he really has. But I reached out to him and met him, and that was right before his book, Calm, Alert, and Learning, was to be published. That was published in 2012, and that was sort of a marker, because what had happened was that Stuart had an autism clinic. It's not just autism, but it had they supported children, in the early years, and their families that were facing real challenges. So there were other things, but it was mostly autism, and it was at York University in Toronto. And so he had this clinic, and they did incredible research, and they supported tons of families. And it was called the Mehri, Mehri Centre, which is an acronym. It stands for Milt and Ethel Harris, who were a husband and wife here in Ontario, who were philanthropists and spent put millions of Canadian dollars, so a lot of money, in to fund this center. And so it was named in their honor. And at the end of their findings, so they did all sorts of research and found, supportive ways, all sorts of really strength-based things around the area of autism. Milt had this dream that, the things that they were doing, which included self-regulation. So it's not that was the founder of Self-Reg. Stuart's work goes back to, decades to Oxford and his studies in the UK. And so Self-Reg has these roots that are in all sorts of different areas, but it's definitely one of them. And this Milt Harris had a dream. He said, this stuff we're doing for children on the spectrum, recognizing stressors and recognizing and reducing the stress, and instead of trying to teach and train good behavior or whatever it is appropriate, when we actually deal with that, reducing the stressors, focusing on the relationship, and work that it changes everything. And these changes we're seeing in kids are amazing, right? And so he was like, this isn't just for kids on the spectrum that are 3 and 4 years old. This is for every child and every human. And so his dream was that it would be through actually originally his dream was that it would be through public education. So the idea being that that's the one place, universal education, where we could reach all children. It grew from there because it is clearly, parenting has become a huge area of the work. We're working with early childhood, we're working with universities, I work with police, we're working with hospital, pediatricians, healthcare, remote communities, and so on. So when the Mehrit Centre wound down at York, he started the Mehrit, which added the T on the end, Centre, which is based here in Peterborough in 2012. So I was part of it. I was connected. I was, volunteering, doing all kinds of stuff to help out. And in 2015, Stuart brought me here. So I left my big roles in government and so on, and he brought me here to run the organization. So I've been running it since 2015. We work online. We have an online school, which there's many people have taken our courses. We had like 7 different courses. I'm teaching 3 right now, and a couple thousand people in there from all different countries. We also work with school boards. We work with parenting groups. We work with early childhood centers. We work with communities in kind of any way that they would like our support. So we do webinars, consulting, mentoring. We usually run big events, but that has been shifted this year as well. So,
I know that soon. Yeah, I know that soon there's going to be a Self-Reg symposium It's moved to the online facilities, right? It used to be in Canada, but now it's online. And well, part of me says that, well, I'm a little sorry because face-to-face relationships are really important, and I remember the atmosphere there, the kind of the interbrain worked. Right, but at the same time, another part of me says, well, maybe it's good it's online. Even more people will be able to participate, because going to Canada is quite far away for some of us. So, there are both sides. Well, I also
can I just Can I just say one thing? So our symposium was 6th annual this year, and the first year we had our first annual, and everybody thought that was sort of, you're calling it your first annual, but we're at 6, and we had last year about 200 people from all over the world come. And it's a 4-day event here in Peterborough. We hope to run it again next year. We run it at the Trent University, and we try to walk our talk in Self-Reg, and so it's not just a bunch of head knowledge of science. There's that, but there's also there's yoga and Zumba, and you can learn to, you can paddle and on the Trent River system here. So it's intended to embed. It's 4 days of like-hearted people that come together and connect with one another, and we really hope to run that again next year. But at the same time, it's exactly like you said. We're trying this year to not make it just an online event, that people there's different levels, and they can connect in with small groups. And other people from around the world. So I hope we have both next year. That's my thinking. We'll do the face-to-face, which is where I first met you, Natalia. It felt like I knew you so well, but we'd never been in the same space together. So it was good to have you wished with us, and Poland was celebrated as part of that week. Was 2 years ago, I think. So so I hope
I felt so welcome then. It was amazing because you made me feel very welcome, and the soft feelings, the kindness was amazing to me, and it really stole my heart. Before I was really enthusiastic about Self-Reg, but Self-Reg Symposium really gave me another boost. So yeah,
good. Well, I hope you can come back another time.
Yeah, I hope. So tell me, tell us more about the Mehrit Centre, because you also do lots of online courses.
So
lots of people are actually interested.
Say that again.
Lots of people are also interested in, making Self-Reg known further. Right, so you teach people who want to promote Self-Reg.
Yeah, so the Mehrit Centre is, we do have an office, so it's just about a 10-minute drive here from my house, but really we're a team of virtual. I work almost always from home. I usually travel for speaking and consulting and that kind of thing. But we have a team of, there's about 50 of us. And there's about 15 staff. So if in 2015 there was me, me and one person named Stephen. So any of you have done the course have met the lovely Stephen who takes care of our e-school. But there were just two of us, and now I think there's 7 of us that are full time, and there's about
Wow.
15 core. But we have teaching assistants, we have speakers, we have so people in different places can get a speaker to come out. You've been on our list for a long time, Natalia, as one of our as part of the team, and we have facilitators, so people that facilitate online courses as well. And so, we offer an early childhood course, which is interesting for those of you here as parents. It is focused on early childhood education, but it's also child development. We have a parenting course, which is a self-directed parenting course. And if you're not on our parenting Facebook group, that's a good resource for anyone that's comfortable with the English. It's parents supporting parents, and there's a lot of self-reggers in there. We have a school leadership course, which is based around this new book, which Stuart and I did and was just released last fall. And we're hoping maybe there'll be a Polish version of both of these 2 books through our publisher in Poland. So that's where the 2 books have been published already. So Stuart's 2 books, Self-Reg, and then Calm, Alert, and Learning, which, by the way, is published because of Natalia advocating for that one a few years ago. And we also have we have our foundations program, which is where I first met Natalia. I was her facilitator in that course. And actually, I met Natalia before. Natalia was, I don't know if you mind me telling Natalia, but
Yeah,
Natalia
sure,
was
go ahead.
Stuart's book, the parenting book Self-Reg, was translated into, it's 8 or 9 languages. It might be 10 now. And Poland, I actually think Poland was the very first one published. The publisher there, Anna, was I think it was one of the, if it wasn't the first, it was the second. I think it was actually released in Polish before it was released in English. I'm not sure if I'm right about that, but many publishers from around the world bought the rights to that, and then they had to hire translators. And so the translator was Natalia, who reached out and was really interested, and the translation led to a deeper interest. And that's, I think, sort of where our partnership with MindCare, first started, and with you, it kind of evolved, and then we got you into our courses, and you were in cohort 1 or 2, one of the very first groups. So, that's but that's how it spreads. Like we have a really big belief about, we're in a sort of interesting situation because we're on a mission. We're a mission-oriented organization. So we've grown a ton. I just told you all those people, and we sustain that. Nobody funds us, nor do we make any profit. We make everything we make goes right back into what we're going to develop next. Like right now, we're developing another course around the reframed, right? So, the vision, the mission, and the vision of the organization is to grow Self-Reg and to nurture it wherever there's interest. I'm a big believer from my years in leadership. I'm not a believer in pushing in sort of the push model, knocking on doors and selling, because people think you're selling a program and so it's more being ready for the opportunities and supporting the places where it can grow. So we have things growing in Australia, New Zealand, Mexico, Poland. There's several places all around Europe. We have some interesting ones in Singapore, for example. So there's all these different places where there's this pocket of passionate people that do what you did, Natalia. They're like, there's more here, and they try to think about how to grow it, and we try to support that. So our courses are interesting because we have a level 2 course, So we have our 3 basic courses, and all of those lead to a certificate, and people can call themselves Self-Reg champions. It's basically learning Self-Reg for yourself is what you're doing, sort of getting the foundations. That doesn't make you an expert. I mean, they're online courses. They're about 5 hours a week. The foundations is about 125 hours of learning. I'm in my 10th year of learning with Stuart, and I still struggle with calling myself an expert, but so there's always a whole lot more to learn, which if you read Self-Reframed, you'll understand why. It's a big book, a lot of science.
Yeah, I'm getting that. I'm getting it, because when I'm reading Reframed, I'm like, okay, it's really not easy to read. And, actually, I can show you how it looks. I don't know if you can see. There's actually every second sentence or every third sentence I underline, because that's an important information to be remembered. And I'm like, okay, there's more to understand, there's more to know. So it's amazing. And this book, without having read Self-Reg, might be a little difficult. Yeah. But it's really, it opens eyes. It opens eyes, I think.
If anybody asks you about the science, that's the book to read. Now, Stuart weaves it through with stories. I had to read it 3 times. I read it with 3 different eyes. I love it, but everything is like, whoa, you have to think about reframing. I mean, he moves through to reframing at a whole societal level, and it threads it through. You don't have to. For those of you out there saying, well, I don't, that's not me. I'm not going to pick up something that could be a university, level book, right? Many parents are reading it and enjoying it, and we're getting tweets and things around it, but you don't have to. What I do think is important, though, is to realize there is a lot of science. This isn't just as simple as taking a few quotes or a few ideas. That there's this body of explanation. So we do a lot of talking about why and why now. So when a child has give me an example, Natalia, of something that a child, that you hear about all the time in Poland.
Screams and shouts and hits other people, or the brother and sister fights. That's typical, right? So I myself have a son who's really very kind of angry lots of times. So so that's kind of.
And so what do we do about that, right? And the important thing from a Self-Reg lens is, I did my years I was a behavior specialist. So I was the one they brought into the schools for the most difficult children. I was inclusion, and I mean, for years, that's who I was. And I was a difficult, I have a personal connection to that, because as a teenager, I dropped out of high school multiple times. And I was I was what you would call an at-risk teenager for sure. So I always wanted to see these kids differently at all the different ages. And so until you can see that differently, that's why your behavior management won't work. Telling, the timeout share or the sticker charts, or in my experience, they don't really work all that well, right? Or, as I said before, if your strategies work and you've got certain, things that you're doing, behavior management, and they work, that's great. That tells you that it was a choice, and the child was able to, to manage it enough to. So you've got to make sure it's not just blind compliance out of fear, because that's different. That's not learning. That's out of fear. But if those are working, but most of the time I find they're not, And so what do we do about it? Well, the very first step. We're playing the long game. People often ask for a quick strategies, and I'll give you a couple today. But you've got to be careful, because you are the strategy, and that doesn't mean you behavior manage. We've got to see it differently. And so even if you never pick up a book,
I could tell a story that really gives you an example of that. With my son, it's really like walking on the tightrope sometimes, and there are techniques that work. And for example, naming emotions very often works, but when there is empathy and when there is this really soft kind of feeling that goes to him, from me. So the interbrain connection is really important. And I remember a time, because he often gets angry, very often gets angry. And for example, he wants to go to the shop. I say no, and then he lies on the pavement and all screaming. Classical meltdown. And naming emotions actually usually worked, but one time I was tense and very tired, so high tension, low energy reserves, and I just named the emotion with the idea, okay, let's go, right? So you're angry, let's go home. And then the meltdown was massive, really massive. So I think it's not enough to just assume that my child's behavior is a stress behavior, but also know the science, really understand the science, because then it makes it easy, and it makes you see that sometimes it really doesn't make any sense to do a certain thing with your child. It might be, it might be various things. For example, when I start talking and explaining it, it goes boom, usually. So there's a lot of science behind every single thing. Teenagers, the same. If I didn't know the science, then I would probably be a bit more tense when they, for example, when my daughter comes home and she's kind of disgusted with people around, and I just know it's her tension, right? And there are reasons, and there are developments in the brain of my teenage daughter that cause it, right? That make the stress reactivity really high. So yeah, for me, this science is really a calming down effect. Understanding.
We can't lend our calm if we're not calm. And that has to do with our self-regulation systems, right? So, and the one thing I'll tell you is I'm thinking of a child that I was working with. Now, this was in a school context, but with the family. And she was 7 and would do just exactly what you just said, right? So they said her behaviors were out of control and that they couldn't get her to do it, and she was getting sent home from school constantly. And, the parents thought the school was blaming them. The school thought the parents were blaming, and they had tried all sorts of different if-then charts, and sometimes they would work and sometimes they wouldn't. And when they wouldn't, she would get what they use the language of violent. I'm really careful around labels like that. I'm not anti-diagnosis. I think if there's a diagnosis and you can get it, then that can be helpful. But we have to be careful with labels like violent, or like bully, like mean, or even like shy. All these sorts of labels actually stick, and they become part of the identity, and it can make things worse. So she had this label of violent, and I taught them, instead of saying that, because it makes it sound like this child is scary to be around. Just say, no, when she gets upset, she hits. Okay, that I can work with. And what happened was I was there twice two different times I was there when she had a full-on, once was a rage, the other was right down on the ground as if she was 2 years old. And you might say, she's choosing that, or she's just spoiled, or trying to get her own way, or no, nobody chooses that. And that's actually not the way the science works. And it's not a choice. It's actually reverting to an earlier developmental level, in a sense, right in front of your eyes. And believe it or not, that is a form of self-regulation. So I want to just clarify that. You're like, I don't want my kid doing that. Yeah, but your child is finding a way to stay in the game, to stay in the zone. So, I've dealt with kids that bang their heads against walls. They get in fights, pick fights with people constantly, the complete shutdown. All of these behaviors, we can call them maladaptive, because they're not helpful. They're not healthy. And they lead to more problems down the road, right? So if people are afraid to play with you because you're always hitting them, you can't get the social development in these sorts of things. But they are still, from a brain-body science perspective, a form of self-regulation. And so it's not a choice. It's happening, in a different part of the brain than the choice part of the brain, which is up here. It's a reaction. So the school where I was, one of the things that I noticed, and you got to look at your kids where the parents are there. You know your kids and trust your instincts and listen to them, and and begin to ask why and why now. You may not have an answer to that. Your child won't. Sometimes they do, but it's more for thinking why and why now. And so they were trying all these different strategies while I was there. And, they had tried timeout, they had tried, and they were doing the, they were doing the nonviolent intervention kind of stuff, right? And somebody was there trying to talk to this little girl about her feelings. She no more had the words to name the feelings in that moment. Like her whole world was rage, and she didn't have that in that moment, right? Those sorts of things happen later once, if it's working with your child, Natalia, that's because in those moments you have that safe relationship from a neuroceptive safety, which is Stephen Porges' work, that your child feels safe enough, right? And connected enough and has enough of the prefrontal cortex online that they can have that conversation and actually have meaning to it. So many times it's not that case. So what do? And I went in, and it looks like it's a bit of magic. It doesn't always work well, and I have been hit and bitten, and it doesn't happen as much anymore because one of the things I do is nothing. That may sound like a very strange strategy. It's hard. You're in the middle of a sidewalk, but it's literally being with, right? You know your child. If you think you can put a hand on their shoulder, for some kids that'll be like like a cactus on their shoulder. Then don't touch them. But for most of us, a little bit of touch, a little bit of forearm, and it's just, I'm here, I'm ready. And so am I saying, so it's called lending our calm. You're actually trying to focus on reflecting on your own state, some exhales. Oftentimes we inhale, that actually revs up the sympathetic system.
Yeah, just exactly.
And you'd be surprised how often that will work. If nothing else, it tells your child, I'm here with you, right? So I sometimes have parents hear me say stuff like that, and they'll be like, are you saying to tell them it's okay? No. But you have to pick your moments, your teachable and your unteachable moments, right? And you're actually helping them learn self-regulation by regulating them, by helping them get their tension down just enough that they can join in the game, right? And so, I mean, if kids do something that I say that, I literally I'll name it, and I'll say, it's no, we don't hit each other, but that's not who you are. Let's get you feeling better, right? And we'll deal with that afterwards. And people think, well, that's teaching them to be, it's the opposite that happens. You're teaching them humanness, right? So that's what I find is we have this strategy in the handbook, but you can find it online too. Just called lend, it's safety, cue safety. So we do it with our voice, the prosody. Like if we're up here like this, we're actually cueing that stress system. It's contagious to be more stressed, right? Or, or we go monotone, or, we yell. And if you yell, you're human. Catch yourself in it and say, okay, that's me overstressed, right? So you slow everything down. You have to be patient, child-led, right? Follow their cues. And you might think this takes more time, but if you're constantly dealing with meltdowns, that's a lot of time, right? A little bit on the front end, and just slow everything down and be with, right? So you're lending the calm. And the child will, a lot of the times. That's what happened with this girl. They were like, how did you do that? And I made everybody go away, right? I said, just leave me for, just a few minutes. And I just stayed with her, right? And then she eventually looked up, saw where she was at, and I helped her. And then so if you do that, it does make a difference.
Yeah, it does an amazing difference. I can see it very often. I am wondering whether we can talk about schools, because, in Poland, lots of parents actually use Self-Reg, and they are quite enthusiastic. But I often hear the question, okay, but how can I regulate a child if he enters the school and, gets lots of stress? And I believe that, after what I saw in Canada, and after I met the teachers who are interested in Self-Reg, I thought about how Poland is a little different. We have a slightly different education system. I believe that most schools are kind of stuck in the stress cycle. So there's still hope that we will, promote self-reg in schools as well. But do you think it's possible for a parent to help a child somehow in all this? I mean, I've made a few difficult decisions last year because my daughter was kind of feeling very badly. So we decided to actually to repeat the year in the school because she was sick, and then she had to repeat the school, but to reduce her stress. But can we actually, do you have any advice about this?
It's a marathon. I mean, I taught in Italy in Milan for 4 years. So I was in an international school, but we had Italian, and I mean, I got to know a little bit about the Italian system. I know that your system is different, and yet, I remember the stress. A lot of the parents that put their children in this school, which had very high standards. It's actually is one of the highest rated international baccalaureate schools now in the world. So it wasn't that it was lower standards, but it was a different approach to education, right? Less of the classical. Do your students in Poland, Natalia, do they do oral exams? Examiners go in and do oral exams with the children?
Yeah, but it's only the end of the secondary school. The maturity exam, so-called, right? When they're 18. So before that doesn't happen, but we still have a lot of written tests and oral tests, and sometimes the teacher just takes the child to the blackboard and asks them to talk about some topics. So that's kind of stressful for kids as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's education around the world is facing challenges. In Canada, even though you met some incredible self-reggers, trust me, we have our problems. And well, even me as a parent, I actually do tons of work all over Ontario, that's my province. But I don't do that much here locally. So it's an interesting sort of challenge, right? So, but education systems around the world, that we have this. You have to remember that that's part of that. That's not necessarily for Self-Reg to develop, but that is part of it, that, we have this education system that was, it hasn't changed that much in 100, 120 years. And that, that it values certain things. And I mean, if there's an area that hasn't kept up with the science in terms of what it looks like in practice, it's a tricky one. We all went to school, so everybody thinks they're an expert in how a school should be, and so it's like an apprenticeship style of learning. You've got at least 15, 20 years of learning what school is supposed to look like, right? It's rows and blackboards and teacher at the front, and lots of places are moving beyond that, but it's a really tricky one to influence. So, what do parents do? And it's frustrating. I get it, because let's say you're starting to get this. You've read the parenting book, which is the Stuart Self-Reg book, and you've read about the 5 domains and through the way he weaves that for parents, that it resonated, right? And you began to answer questions, or lots of times parents will say, it validated how I see my kid. How can I get the rest of the world to see it? This sort of thing. The question about schools is tricky, because in my work, many people, I'm always getting people, to tell me that I should knock on this door, go to that person. And so I part of my role, I have a very old German Shepherd here. You'll see her in the background. See her? Yeah. She's back there anyway. She's 14, and you can see her noodling around.
Oh yeah.
So my work as in these various leadership roles that I had, I was director of planning, research, and evaluation, for example, for ministry. I was the one that people came knocking on my doors for, right? And then at the school level, everybody had these ideas, and I learned that it doesn't really work to knock on doors all that well. I think it's more important to listen for opportunities. So what can parents do? the worst thing that you can do, so I want to tell you that, is go in there with the finger, right, wagging, and you got, and we have people that do that, right? And they're passionate. They want the schools to see their kids differently, and I totally get that. If you join that Facebook group, it's Self-Reg Parenting, you'll find all kinds of parents posting frustrations about school stuff, right? And what do you do about it? So that it's not, you can't just go in with all the answers, because it's not that simple. And in fairness to the educators, the information they're getting about programs and processes and what it look like is coming from everywhere, and the accountability.
And they seem to be very tired with it.
Yeah.
Because during one of the sessions for teachers, they kind of appreciated Self-Reg, really. But for some of them, it was another program, because it was actually, the director, the principal invited us and actually made all the teachers attend. And some of them were kind of, oh no, another piece of training which is going to tell us what to do. And we really cannot sometimes, because they also have their stress, their system. And sometimes they ask me questions, okay, it's really all beautiful, but how are we supposed to do it when we are faced with such and such a situation? Yeah. And we get really sometimes no help, so yeah. So, what actually for me, it's kind of what you're saying.
That happens.
It's about being realistic as well.
So I'm a big believer this is hard for parents, because if you have a really challenging teacher, I've had to make hard choices like you too, right? You can't just go in, you're not going to, be able to come in with a book or whatever and necessarily change it. But it's little by little. And so Stuart is a big believer in embracing resistance. And, we can't thou shalt it on people. Often what they're saying is, I don't know how to teach and do this, or they'll misunderstand and think you're saying go soft on all kids. No, it's not about that. You need structure. Structure actually gives, but you need flexibility. If a meteor lands in your backyard and you don't, at the school, and you don't stop the lesson that you were doing to go look at the meteor, well, then it is really teacher top down, right? So, for me, the thing that parents can do is advocate, right? You are the advocate for your child. Open the door. Like, I know when I do presentations, so if I go to a place where people are there by invitation, everybody is like, give me more. But lots of places I go, and somebody in a higher up level has said, I want this for all the schools, and you'll see people like this. It's okay, right? So the point of entry, honestly, for educators, just like parents, is noticing themselves in the equation, right? So there's this, that kids are not, lazy. If they look unmotivated, why? There are reasons and mechanisms, and when we can get to those, it comes back online. But unfortunately, there's no really quick thou shalt way. We have parents that print off, like, there's some info sheets that we did for you, or we laid them out, you translated them. They're Polish info sheets. We could do more of that sort of thing. We do have a new organization coming, which will have a Polish area. It's called Self-Reg Global, which is just trying to get this. The learning in the e-school and all that will still stay with TMC, but this is helping. We're going to have Self-Reg TV and so channels and this sort of thing. We have big dreams, but we do it with TMC, and we're passionate about it. So we're finding our way on that, but we'll have more information within 2 months on that. But beginning to send information, but to ask the right questions. I find if you have if you're really struggling, and because if you could just give stuff to people and they're going to be like, telling me what to, it's not going to help you get anywhere. A really well-placed question could go a long way. Well, what have you tried? Right? So the child's not doing math. As soon as math comes out, well, there's reasons for math. We actually know from the science that the brain's having the same response to math in many children. It's called high math anxiety, that it is having as if you were to come across, a wild bear, in your part of the world. Like, what would happen? What happens to the brain? Well, it's happening for math, right? That's absolutely amazing. We think kids give up on stuff, but we actually know from the science that the physiology shifts right? So Stuart talks about limbic braking, but you can measure it through pupil size. If I was to give you all a math test right now, I would, and just have a little camera hooked up to all of your eyeballs. I couldn't see you swearing. I couldn't hear see sweat. I couldn't know the gender or your age. I couldn't see body language, nothing. I can just see your eyeball. I will be able to predict, and I'll be right most of the time, at least 4 out of 5 times, the moment before you put the pencil down when you're writing a hard test. And you do it because the eyeball gets at a maximum size. Sometimes it goes boom. Sometimes it just goes up and goes down. But what does that tell us? It tells us.
There's a funny story because I remember Stuart Shanker looking at one of the summer symposium participant eyes, and he said, "Oh, you must be tired." So she was like, "How does he know?"
Yeah, he reads me all the time. It took him a couple of years for him to tell me that he watches my feet in videos. When we're filming in videos to know my stress level, right? But these signs tell us. We try to get the kid to stick with it, to do their homework, and it's like it's not up here a cognitive choice. Something bottoms out in their body, right? The energy, it just bottoms out for us, and that's when we see the shutdown, the refusal, the fights, right? So and we work on that instead of trying to get them to be a good, student or teacher or be doing their homework or what have you. So that's the school ones, I believe in advocacy. You can share resources, print off, if you said like, I don't have money to buy a book for my kid's teacher, well, you can drop off an info sheet, just print one from MindCare, one of those ones, for example. At least it's a starting place. And ask good questions, advocate for your child, right? And ask good questions and keep asking them, right? Ask to speak to the school specialist and, keep asking. And, sometimes you do have to make hard choices. I moved my child from a class once too, right? I just switched her over. The hard
webinars, but I made it for the teachers as well. Yeah. So I'll be doing a few free webinars for the teachers, so that might also help. Right now they are in a very specific situation, but school soon begins again, probably. So so we'll come to that.
Now all of a sudden we've got this physical distancing, or if you all are calling it social distancing, I like thinking of it as physical distancing. It still applies. Suddenly people had to go and work from home. You ask a lot of people now, like I like working from home, but I'm seeing a lot of teachers, like they're just drained. You think it's exhausting, right? And there's stressors in the biological domain from the computer, there's social stressors, there's pro-social, all of a sudden everybody's judging you or has advice for you, right? We have a lot of issues of equity here. So some kids don't have computers or good internet, or they don't want live video going into their homes. There's all these extra different stressors. It's an interesting time to really think about self-reg. So it's why and why now? Why am I, I'm so patient for my kid all day, and then I'm yelling at my partner, right? Or I'm mad about the neighbor next door who did nothing. Why? Well, because you bottomed out and you're human, right? And these are all working on your energy as part of you as well. So, and just seeing it differently.
Yeah, Dominika also writes that for parents it's also difficult, and I think it's difficult for everyone, because every change is difficult, and it actually shows how well we self-regulate, because now we are exposed to a bigger stress, and it's really I think it's a lesson to all of us. In very critical times, hard times, we also need to understand why now, and try to do something about it.
Absolutely. And recognize if I've been more tired than I usually am, and you can actually, if you know me well, you can see it in my face, and yet I'm getting enough sleep. But it's all these other layers. There's construction going on behind me, so I'm hearing this machine all day long. We have to organize how we do some things at the Mehrit Centre. I'm parenting. There's all these sorts of things, and so I've just been a little more tired, and I recognize that as part of as part of this. So it is more difficult for parents. Like I said, some of us are worried about money. Some people have lost their jobs, their income streams. It's all part of it. And, people will say, does just knowing that make it better? Well, it helps, because if you're, instead of as a parent trying to be everything to everybody and you're exhausted, it's actually a generous thing to take a few moments for yourself, and especially the moms out there, we do tend to do it all. We have the job and the kid and, not meaning to take away from the men and the group, but really we feel the weight of the world. And all of a sudden it's a little unsure. You guys have all the political stuff, changes and pressures and things going on. That all weighs on us, right? So it's not just about coping with stress. It's about restoring our energy to our what do we do just for us? Even if it's just 7 minutes a day, start there, right? The little things that we can do to get ourselves feeling better as part of Self-Reg.
For me, sometimes it's even less than 7 minutes. It's just, going to the toilet and making a very short meditation there. It's like, it's the only closed space at home where I can actually, switch the, lock the door. And then, 3 minutes, I'm better. But, well, it works short term. I understand that. But still, you have to do that sometimes as well.
And have soft eyes for yourself. So that's a saying that I guess I'm kind of known for, but I didn't come up with it. It was an elder in a Aboriginal community, in the Indigenous community where I was working and was learning about Self-Reg. And she says, in my language, this means when we look at children through this, so we mean science informed. We know there's more going on than just bad choice or poor behavior or a bad kid or but it's also in ourselves as adults. So, and look, it's not just you guys, it's me too. I have moments that I'm, if my daughter comes down, she'll tell you, a less than perfect parent, right? But have those soft eyes for ourselves and say, okay, right? That moment, that pause, and recognize it for what it was, an overstressed system. And you don't have the resources to deal with it, right? And so it's a sign for you, it's information. And so looking at ourselves, not just our kids with soft eyes, but also those teachers who are really tough on kids. How can we look at them with soft eyes? They've been doing things one way their whole life. All of a sudden you're telling them it's done a totally different way. That's actually stressful, right? So, and it begins to open doors because we see people differently. Our body actually adapts less of a threat response, right? So when I can see someone with kindness, it actually can make a difference, right? Practice it and try it. See somebody who gets under your skin, notice it for what it is, a bag full of stressors, and try to think about, your own state in the moment while you're with them and see what you notice. But why now? And soft eyes for yourself is important.
Yeah, I think it's really important in the Polish society, to start looking like this at everyone. It's not easy sometimes because, when you're surrounded with people who are really tense, and like you said, the teacher who actually struggles and, but the first thing you see is fight or flight, actually fight more than flight. Sometimes it's not easy because we ourselves kind of feel the same, right? Because when somebody starts fighting, then we actually resonate. So it's important to really understand where we are ourselves, right? Yeah, I'm on the verge of fight or flight. So before I say something, maybe I need to do something for myself before, right? To start looking differently. What we lack in Poland is this kind of kind dialogue between different sides, so to say. So we are kind of really fragmented. There are the teachers. They are kind of a group that sticks together and usually is a bit angry at parents. Parents are kind of also in kind of a conflict with the teachers, and they judge them. Somewhere in between, there's the children, and also the government, the principals, and this, and there are also school psychologists or pedagogy assistants, and who actually do not really have this kind of, they don't have really many ways to help, right? They can, but they are limited. And I think we need to start looking at all those different groups and reduce stress on the line, so to say, in the dialogue. So
it's happening
it's
in
kind of complex, but I enjoyed really. Sorry? I enjoyed when you talked about every single person in the school being a part of a child's day, even the school bus driver that helps the child start the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and sometimes they can be the anchor for a child, right? So it's hard because what you're describing is not just Poland; it's in many countries, and it's in many places in Canada too, by the way. So we are doing pretty well if you comparatively, whatever you were sort of looking. But it's not that the whole country is like me, or sees sort of self-reg and schooling like me. There's a lot of different ideas, and there's a real push-pull between, sort of more of a classic back to basics-y kind of system, and and there's debates about inclusion and kids' rights to be in schools and this sort of thing. The one thing that I really think is important, and I still have to catch myself on, is that if we spend all of our time thinking about what other people need to do, we miss that, they sometimes say one point, you've got three fingers pointing back to you. We miss ourselves. So when we're judging, and I don't mean to be all fluffy, airy, positive, you can be critical and kind. You can be both, right? So it's just recognizing, okay, what can I do? And you can have an influence. Knock on doors, advocate for change. You are the change. So Dominica's putting some really interesting comments up here.
You too are the change. All of us are the change, I think.
And so I can't control, because you can't, just like you can't control your child, not really. You can scare them to control, or teachers can scare them, but you can't control another human, but you can influence. And, the one person that, if your sphere of influence is you, if you have a sphere of influence where some people on this call might be educators too, right? And you can influence a few more, great. But catch yourself in the kind of looking about what everybody else needs to do as not in a mean way. It's because you care so much. You want better for children. But it's also showing you that it's dysregulating to you too, right? And so we can focus on ourselves. And that can have these ripple effects. That's what we've seen here in Canada, and we've seen it there's been a number of places we've seen it. So you start with the people that get this. If you're advocating and you have a teacher that actually really likes this, or a principal, that's where to shine the light and pay attention. And you can reach out through Natalia and see if there's anything I can ever do. I'll be happy to, hop on another webinar at another time, right, with some teachers, for example.
Yeah, we'd love to. Yeah.
And this book, it's in English. We're having issues where you can't actually buy it from Poland right now, which is frustrating. They're working on the international, but it is available and through our website, and it's full of strategies and stories. So it's not like the thick book, and it has different journeys and different ways that we've seen schools do it in all kinds of different places. So that might be helpful as well for educators.
I think it's a very good book because it's very well structured, and it gives you lots of ideas to really use, and different paths that you can follow, and it made me understand that, there are different ways of promoting Self-Reg and starting Self-Reg. For some of the schools, it will be just, the seeds. And for some of the schools, it will be the haven. And of course, we actually probably all dream about the havens, but we need to start at the seeds. So so that's where the start is, at the seeds right now, probably.
I'm running an online book club. I'm running an online Facebook book club for that right now, that even if you don't have the book, I tried to design it so that people can participate. we're about halfway through, but it'll be open till the end of June. There are, I think it's 400 members. There's a lot. So you're very welcome to come in and join in there. If you want to learn a little bit about Self-Reg in schools, I'll make sure Natalia has the link. But you can find it through the TMC.
Yeah, I'll try to find it right now.
Yeah, and you're welcome to join in. And there's questions and there's little videos, and you'll recognize I'm filming them in the same place. But again, even if you don't have the handbook, and there are some resources that you'll have links to. So if it's an area of interest to you, it might be there's something more free that you can do.
Yeah. I think I might also, give some ideas from the book during the webinar. So talk a bit about the book as well. Yeah, I hope it will be published in Polish as well. We actually have one book for teachers in Polish, and I think the two books will actually kind of work very well together. In Polish, this calm alert and learning, it's called Samoregulacja w szkole, and it's the cover is all black, like a blackboard, and I hope the Self-Reg schools will be available too soon.
Well, the handbook goes hand in hand with Calm Alert and Learning. Samoregulacja. It's actually the follow-up. It's the same publisher.
It's so hard.
It's the how-to book without being a program. It's not a program, but it gives you lots to choose from and learn.
Yeah, exactly. Susan, can we round off the...
I'm conscious of the time, and we wanted to give folks a chance to ask some questions. Is that where you were going next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought so. I think we might look at the questions in a minute. If you have any questions, then please feel free to ask. And I think we might also round up the interview with the question about the Self-Reg values, because when I attended the courses, I understood as well also that Self-Reg is really deeply grounded in values. Which of them do you think are the most important for us?
Let me just open my values up here. So, if I'm opening them, they're in the handbook. We use them in all sorts of different ways. It was me that kind of pulled everyone together a few years ago when I first took over the Mehrit Centre to come up with our values. I really believe, and that's what we try to do at the Mehrit Centre, in values-driven leadership, values-driven decision-making. I think it's also a modern way to leadership, to be honest with you. If you look up the leadership sort of approaches in organizations, many are doing it this way. But we chose it because it spoke to us. I mean, Stuart is doing this work because he's passionate about kids and the well-being of kids and families and communities all around the world, so not just here in Canada. I came here, I moved, this 3,000 kilometers away from where I'm from, because I'm passionate about Self-Reg having the opportunity to do this for people, and to support and to see, in my behavior work with kids, I saw them differently. I definitely knew they weren't their behaviors, but I still couldn't get at, how to change a child's trajectory, and, how can I support these school or these educators or these parents or this, small community and seeing things differently. So we came up with the values, we worked hard on them, and we embed them in everything we do as an organization. And it actually helps us with decision making. It's how we hire, by the way. We do not hire anybody on our team. We have staff and contractors, but we don't go for that aren't committed to our values, right? And demonstrating those values. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. In fact, if you were to ask my staff, they would tell you that this is a very safe place, a safe organization to not be perfect, because somebody needs a mental health day. You take the mental health day. We were doing extra things for our team to help them through COVID. So it's not about being perfect, but it is about being committed And if it's being committed to these sets of values, some of them are about that there's no single way to do self-reg. It's not a program. And some people, it's important to me, really important, that people don't take self-reg and try to turn it into a program. Because if you do that, you're not honoring self-reg. That's not what it's about. It's also about not coming in as the experts into school, into community, into a family, and with all the answers about the shoulds. It's about being humble and honoring honoring the roots. I think is a sort of a part of it. It's how we treat one another when we disagree. I mean, all of these are sort of parts of the values. We're really focused on the well-being of kids, and that's part of it. We look at it universally. It's about everyone. So in self-reg, I mean, it's kind of an interesting one because one of the values that's most important, I would think, is that people come and want to learn because they want to learn about their children, right, or their students. Tends to be what brings people to self-reg. It's not always. We've had people come for help with their mother-in-laws, this kind of thing, seniors and that kind of thing. But it's mostly around children. But when we begin to learn it, we realize, this is about me as well, right? It's about me as well. And so, I mean, the well-being of our kids is inseparable from our health and well-being. And that's not criticizing, that's not a weakness, but that's saying, that's part of being human, right? And so I think that's a really important one, the fact that there's no universal approach to it. But really, I think in a Polish circumstance, the one thing that I would say, Natalia, it's grounded in relationships. It's grounded in trust, right? So the way that we're growing self-reg, we took Stuart's work, and we've made so much stuff freely available, and we don't get paid for any of that. Everybody should know that. So the money that we earn goes to pay for these things, right? Many people, me included, started with us as volunteers. I worked for 6 months for nothing because I believed in this, right? And that wasn't somebody taking advantage of me. I believed in this. You translated a bunch of stuff for us for nothing, right?
Actually, lots of work is free.
So in our organization, I believe in the like-hearted people, but we also make a lot of things freely available, and there's a lot of trust that goes with that, right? So I mean, I think that's an important one. We really want. People don't need to be experts. We have many self-reggers out there. There's a whole group of people in Poland. Like, it's really kind of cool. I'm teaching one right now, and there's at least one person from Poland in the early childhood course I'm facilitating right now. But there was one, I think there was one in the school leadership I did last fall too. So, folks come and learn. And then you try to bring it to other people. It's not as easy to do. You asked me my definition, and I talked for 5 minutes, right? I mean, it is about stress, energy, and tension, but there's a lot to it. So I mean, I think that's important. Our level 2 program, which is where people can earn a certificate to be self-reg learning facilitators. I mean, the reason we created that course, there's a couple of reasons, but one of them was we really want people to share, I mean, honoring the IP, the intellectual property, saying this came from Stuart, and, this came from the Mehrit Centre. And, if you're using it in bigger ways, you've had our permission to do that in bigger ways. I mean, we put that in our but we do what we can to support, and we still try to keep our wheels on. But we created that Learning Facilitators program because it was me that really wanted that program, because I noticed people were doing one of our champion level programs, our foundations at the time, and they were running out. They were so excited about self-reg. But you go to teach it and you're teaching something different, right? Or something related, or you pull a little bit of self-reg. And so it's important to me that if people are taking self-reg, that they understand you don't have to agree with it, but at least understand what is self-reg, what is Stuart Shanker's framework, and we honor homage to 40 years of his life. He doesn't take a cent. So just to tell you how much of a values-driven organization this is, he does not take a cent ever. So this is a values-driven organization. This is I do. I get paid a salary. I pay my mortgage. But that course was to help people learn the 5 steps of Self-Reg. So in the handbook, I call them the 5 practices. So it's reframing behavior, recognizing stressors across 5 domains, reducing the stress. So that's the coping stuff. Everything we can to dial down the stress. But someone who's showing us they're overstressed. So stress is not bad. Too much stress with not enough resources is a problem. So we are not going easy on kids by lightening their stress load. When they're overstressed, we're being kind to them. Reflect and develop an enhanced stress awareness, interoception. Many of us don't even notice, when we're hungry, for example, and if it was all about self-control, we'd all be skinny or run whatever, it's whatever your goal was. It's not just about that, but we have to become aware of what's going on inside our body and then outside as well. So it's a reflection. And step 5 is that restoring, it's respond and it's restoring. It's the stuff that makes us feel human and connected, and the things that give meaning to our life is step number 5. So that course is about learning those and thinking about how to bring them to other people, right? And so the people, they earn a certificate. It's not that if you get a certificate, you work for TMC. It doesn't work like that. You can apply to work for TMC. And some people do. We have people that have that certificate you have to have that certificate to present but there's over 500 people that have that certificate now. And it's a good thing. It helps them bring Self-Reg to others. But that's part of what we're going to be looking at in Self-Reg Global, how to manage that without being overly controlling. Just make sure the IP is honored, that we're respected and honored as well, and that what's being brought forward to people is truly Self-Reg, and where it isn't, that you can clearly explain, oh no, okay. You mentioned social emotional learning, for example, Natalia. That is totally fine. That is not Self-Reg, but it's totally connected and appropriate, and just being able to recognize they are related. But when the social emotional learning stuff doesn't happen, what does a child need in that moment? That's the Self-Reg, right? So I hope I answered that. I think it's about looking at ourselves first, recognizing that none of us are full experts, especially on other people, right? Trusting our parents' voice and what they're feeling and noticing. And, it's like on the airplane where you put your mask on first. We have to work on our masks on first too, so.
Exactly. Well, we've got 3 questions from Facebook, and one of them, I think we can start from the middle one. Alicia asks, is Reframed a different book than our Green Self-Reg book? Yes, it is a completely different book, a new book, which is only in English, right? Reframed. And it's actually digging deeper into the science, I think. So it's a little more. And Alicia also asks, but question is how to not get infected by this rage of the child, for example, I think, if you're in a rush, for example. And another question, I will read the 2, and then Susan, I'd like you to decide which one you'd like to deal first, okay? Anna asks, have you experiences of working with adult people with deep intellectual disability?
Yeah, they're all great questions. Reframed was just published. I'll just address the book by the University of Toronto in April. It might have been the end of March. It will likely be translated into other languages, and it is available internationally. You can find that. So it is a terrific book. If you like the science, it's a good one. It's not just science. It weaves philosophy, and it gives you a look into Stuart Shanker's brain, which is intense and wonderful and brilliant. And but it is a good book, but it is a big read. So that was just published from like I said, U of T this spring. So both of those 2 books, Self-Reg Schools is new too. It was just published 6 months ago, and there's another one in the early works too. So stay with that's Stuart's writing. So stay with, keep watching. I hope that our publisher in Poland, which is, pronounce that for me, will you, Natalia? It's Anna. It's
Mamania.
Yeah.
Anna and Mamania.
That's our partner publisher in Poland and has been for years. So if anything new comes out from us, it will come out through that publisher and through her. So so to answer the other questions, let me start with the first one from Alicia. Okay, so it's a really good question, right? How do how to not get infected by this rage if you're in a rush, for example? So I'm assuming you mean a child is in a rage and how to not have it sort of contagious over to you? So, okay, and Natalia's nodding. If it's a different, I'll answer that, and if it's a different one, type. Are we okay to go a couple minutes over, Natalia?
Yeah, I think so.
It's
all right.
I don't care. So,
if it's okay with you.
It's a really good question, and it's actually a really hard one and an easy one to answer in some ways. This is not a choice. So being affected by other people's stress is not a choice. It's something that happens to us, right? So in our early childhood course, Stuart talks about the research around tuning forks, which if you can imagine one tuning fork ringing, okay, so imagine a tuning fork. I don't know much. He plays the piano. I mean, he's a musician too, right? But anyway, one tuning fork rings and then the other one will vibrate. If you've ever had anything that, you're feeling the vibrations of something coming through. It's a bit like that, right? So what you can do is, so recognizing that that's going to happen. If you've ever said something mean to a person that you really didn't mean, it just kind of blurted out. That's an example. It's like a limbic punch. It comes from your limbic system. So you may not be able to in the moment. Okay. So that's the first hard truth I'm going to tell you. I wish there was some magic strategy I could give you to make that not happen. I can't. But I can tell you that the two things that you can do that can help. Oh. Are you still there? Can somebody type and tell me if they can hear me? Okay, so you can hear me. It's just Natalia that we've lost. So my screen just went dead. So the two things that I can tell you is that reflecting on it afterwards. So if you got in the rage, you got in the rage, right? You can't undo that. And if it makes you feel better, I have moments, not so much rage. I'm pretty good now, but I have moments where I just, I have moments and all I do is notice it for what it is. I got dysregulated. I didn't handle it well. If I need to say sorry to someone, I do. Right? And I look at myself with those soft eyes. And what happens is the more and more you reflect, so the less and less these happen because you will notice it as it's coming. I have examples where somebody else's rage did not affect me at all. Why? Because I was able to see their rage for what it was, total dysregulation, right? And it's not I'm so strong, you're not going to affect me. It's just like, it's almost compassion. So that's my answer. So if you're in a rush, but notice I'm in a rush. So if I'm trying to get my kid out the door, that's my rush. My anxiety, you can hear your voice up high, is part of adding to it. So I hope that helps. So it's two things. One is you may not be able to, but with practice, it's like I like yoga. Practice over time. You'll find that happening less and less. And just be kind with yourself and notice that's part of it, okay? So I'll let you tell me, is there anything else you want me to add to that, Natalia? Is a pretty good answer. There's no magic switch.
Yeah, I think
the switch off.
It's a great answer, actually. What you said really helps me with my youngest one. And I think of it as some kind of training, because at the very start, it was very difficult to not resonate with him. But it happened lots of times, and I actually started thinking about regulating my own emotions and just being there, being there, not expecting of myself that I will not do this, I will do that I will be efficient in making it short because it doesn't help. And still, there were times where, for example, he shouted for 40 minutes in the kindergarten. I was like, what can I do, right? Because you want it to end fast. you want to not be ashamed. But if you work on that and just see, it's not, see it realistically. It really won't happen if I cannot tell him stop yelling, for example, because it doesn't help. For me, this kind of realism also helps. And it also doesn't help for myself to say, well, don't resonate. Well, I do, and I'm angry, and sometimes I say, yes, I am angry. I need to calm down. So yeah, it's the best way to really acknowledge that this is happening, understand, and then with time, it gives you patience. Of course, I know children are different, right? Some children's rage is really amazing, and it's extreme, I'd say. So so it really depends. Yeah.
And Dominica is saying, and we have to be careful not to add to it. Like you can put oil on a fire if we keep kind of trying too much, right? So I find just being present makes a really big difference. But I see Dominica saying sometimes it's helpful to take a few steps back. I'm not a big believer in timeouts. Another time, if you want to talk early childhood, I can explain my thinking there. And I'm not judging you if you use timeouts. I've tried them too. But the one person I take a timeout for is me. And what a different message that is. I don't have to do it anymore. My daughter's 12. But each time I sort of help soothe her, help lend my calm, it's teaching her how to do that for herself, how to self-regulate, right? I'm calming her down so she can solve her problem. But I mean, there's definitely times I need a few minutes with my partner, Eric. Sometimes there are just moments and I'm just like, and so it can make a difference. What we don't want to do is, and it's a totally different message to say, I need a time out. We're not breaking that into brain, that relationship. We're not saying you got to be a good kid to come back in the circle or whatever. We're saying, I love you, but I need a few minutes. I need to get myself a little balance. Make a cup of tea or whatever, right? So it's a good one. But just think of each experience, right or wrong, as a learning opportunity. And keep asking, why am I now, for your behavior, for partner's behavior, for kids, and be kind to yourself. A child having a meltdown for 40 minutes in a kindergarten, and you're the parent there, that's hard on the parent because everybody's looking at you, and that's pro-social stress, and you really want to help your kid, but you want to get out of here as fast as possible. Totally compassion, right? So
all those expectations are very difficult because, in the kindergarten, they knew I was a psychologist and a Self-Reg expert. And my kid just goes boom. And, I was like, oh, what are they going to think about me? And then I caught this thinking and I was like, okay, so they're going to think. And that kind of calmed me down. But, you have to realize there's science behind it, and sometimes you can have all the understanding, all the psychology behind you, and it's just boom. And then you just have to stay calm and do.
And you slip back into the self-control mindset that you're supposed to have a quick answer when you don't, right? So it's you lend your calm, right? And I'm more interested in how did it get to the point that your son is screaming for 40 minutes, right? That's not criticizing. People will often put it on parents. They think they were fine till I got here. But there's reasons for that, and it's a sign, not just, my parents are soft on me.
Because he's got lots of sensory, overload. Yeah,
they're little,
and he's kind of, has all those.
Yeah. So those are kids that could have probably used a few breaks doing things they like earlier in the day so that they're not so wound up.
Well, actually, we had to stop going to the kindergarten because he was overloaded, and we are working on the sensory processing issues. All this understanding was there, but it's still. I understand that the sensory processing problems and lots of other things caused it, but also the stress in the kindergarten itself. So so that happens.
So advocate, watch out for labels. Protect your child from whatever might be spewed. because it's a misunderstanding. Sensory processing stuff is real, and it does affect many. And there's a whole lot going on, even if kids like being, 30, I don't know how big your classrooms are, but there's a lot of stuff going on all day long that drains a little system. And these are kids, right? How can we see them through those eyes? So I want to do the next question. So it's a great one about working with adults with intellectual disability. So Self-Reg applies to everyone and anyone. It does. And it especially applies, whatever the diagnosis is, stress is always a part of it. Okay, so I told you Stuart did a lot of work in autism, and I'll get to adults with intellectual disability in a moment. But a lot of work with autism, and that doesn't take that diagnosis away, right? But if you realize that stress, a lot of what we do, we've learned from nonverbal kids at 3, right? Because we began to recognize that these were signs of overstress, and that exacerbates everything. So if you want to think about working with adults with intellectual disability and deep intellectual disability, it still applies. So if we want to use from the energy-centered teaching model, which we talk about in a few places, but it's in the handbook, we need to feel safe. Every single one of us needs to feel protected. That's neuroceptive safety. That's not just the idea of safe. It's not just physical, it's emotional, culture, and gender, and sexuality, all these sorts of things in terms of our faith. There, all these different areas. And there's a part of the brain that actually registers safety or threat. So we may do all the right things, and the child or the adult or the senior still isn't feeling safe. You got to work on that first. So that applies, right? Connection, the relationships absolutely matter, right? So that applies as well. So you can use the 5 steps of Self-Reg in any context. If you've got even if you've got somebody that's totally nonverbal, because again, it's not about words. It's about being in a regulated, balanced state. And it's actually towards the goal of joy and happiness and independence and solving your own problems, all of these sorts of things. But it can absolutely apply. What I would do is a 5-domain stress scan is a great place to start. If you have somebody that's doing really well, great. What can you learn? What are the contexts? What are the factors? If they're not doing well, right? Think about stressors in the physical domain, right? Light, sounds, noise, certain foods, lack of sleep, right? Dehydration, all of these things, that you've got allergies, or these can all be stressors. Emotion domain, that's not naming emotions, that is about the stress of emotion. We're worried, right, about the outcome of whatever is going to happen, or we feel embarrassed, or we feel frustrated. Frustrated is an emotion that brings out what looks like bad behavior in kids. They look like they're being spoiled. They're frustrated. That's a strong emotion, uses up energy, right? Cognitive, you're giving me too many directions at once. Social, right? I'm with other people. We all need other people, but some of us get very overwhelmed by too many other people for too long, right? And the prosocial, empathy, the taking on the stress of others, guilt, injustice can sort of be one. So you can absolutely apply it. And the whole goal is not to remove all the stress for somebody with a disability, but that none of us want. That's not what we need to do. It's not even possible. If you understand the science of stress, it's not even possible. Stress is what gets you up in the morning. You get a jolt of cortisol, right? But reducing the ones that aren't necessary and helpful, right? So trying to say that, growth promoting, right? Looking at the window of tolerance. I really like that. The work of the window of tolerance, Pat Ogden, and Dan Steele, of course, talks about that, which I think is another book you guys have in Polish for sure. But it's like, if it's within the window of tolerance, a little bit of struggle is a good thing. Let them figure it, if it becomes too much, then we need to, how can we dial down some of these stressors? And how can we teach, help somebody else, without language. So remember, this was done with 3-year-olds. So don't get caught up in the fact that they need to write a 5-page profile, which you can all do. How can we begin to understand? I'm coming overstressed. I feel it like a sneeze coming on. and knowing what to do, what my strategies are to get myself feeling just right and okay. Right. So I hope that helps. I'm very short-tempered. It didn't take much. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you, I'm not a clinician, or I'm not a psychologist. My degrees are all in education, but the signs of a short temper are, that means that you can be hijacked, limbic hijacked really easily, right? So again, that goes back to the science. If you read, it's definitely in common learning. I think it's in Self-Reg. If you read Reframed, it's in there as well too. But it can be that you have a primed limbic system. An allostatic overload can be part of it, but you can have this primed limbic system, so you get your short temper quickly. Sometimes that, I used to have that, and it went back to my early years. I had a really rough upbringing in some ways. Other people have it worse. But I would be quick to, I had someone once tell me I could be a junkyard dog, right? Protective or whatever. And now it's a good thing in sort of protecting. But when I was in high school, that's what got me kicked out of high school all the time. So you just look at yourself with soft eyes. So I would learn Self-Reg for you, Felicia, because those are just, and you'll see yourself so gently, because the science tells you, oh, this is not me being a bad person, or me being, angry, or not being able to manage this. This is how my stress system keeps me safe. It's not actually super supportive right now. So how can I understand it? And like learning Self-Reg will actually help you shift that. But it's a good thing to notice and to say out loud to the world, oh, well, I'm human. So Natalia, we've taken up.
Yeah, I think that's the best part of it. Be human.
Yeah.
Because Self-Reg makes you realize we're actually human, all of us, everyone. We all of us. It happens to all of us at times, and there's only as much as we can do at the very moment. All right, Susan, I think thank you very much for joining us today. I hope we will talk about some other things like teaching and early years education soon. And and I hope that all the plans and dreams about Self-Reg growing will be smooth, and yeah. Thanks so much.
Well, they're always a little bumpy. Thank you. And I apologize, there's a bit of a delay, so I apologize if I was speaking over you sometimes. But thank you, everyone. You inspire me.
Yeah.
And thanks to all the folks passionate about Self-Reg in Poland. I think you're one of the countries we're so excited about, because there's so many people moving it in the right direction. Excited to be working more with Natalia, and like I said, go check out our publisher to find those books, and hopefully more will be coming to you soon. Take care, everyone. Find me on Facebook. Come and say hi in the Facebook group.
Yeah,
bye, everyone.
Definitely. Bye. I will post the links soon. So yeah, so we will have links for all of you. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.